Hello, everyone. It's been a while and I'm very excited to be back. So, welcome to HR for the Heart, where we take people's systems from the corporate world and apply them to our relationships. So you're welcome back. In the last video, we started to explore the concept of bias and we talked a little bit about it. So in this video, I'm going to be diving much deeper into another kind of bias, and we're going to look at other related concepts. So here's the thing, everyone has a bias. It's innate in us. Even the most open-minded people have bias. But the thing with bias is it's also about, when you're seeking relationship. So let's unpack today the concept of affinity bias and trauma bonding. And we're going to look at how they make you feel like you've found the right person or you've found your tribe. But sometimes it's really just falling into a pattern that seems familiar. So let's talk about it. So in HR, affinity bias is, when we gravitate towards people who remind us of ourselves. And sometimes maybe we went to the same school, we have the same background, we share the same hobbies, or we just have the same energy. There used to be this thing about developers that graduate from a certain school versus another school. And you find managers that graduate from a particular school gravitating towards developers from those schools because they have some kind of connection and it feels familiar. So suddenly everything that candidate says, sounds much better or lands better for them. And here's the HR truth. Is that sometimes comfort doesn't always equal competence. So because we like this person or they seem like they'll be a great person to work with, it's not really, it doesn't speak to their level of competence. So it's important to, of course, start with being clear on what you're looking for so that you then use that to manage bias. But let's dive deeper into how affinity bias can show up in dating. That feeling, you get a feeling sometimes when you're talking to someone and then you feel like you've known them for a very long time. You click, you have many things in common. And sometimes, yeah, it could be. And other times it's just your bias that is showing up because really, we're wired to feel safe around things that we recognize. So if your upbringing or your culture or your past relationship has informed your brain on what love is supposed to feel like, then you're gonna naturally be searching for those patterns, even when they're not healthy or when they're not what you need. And that's how affinity bias can sneak into a dating relationship. It whispers like, oh, I feel like I've known them for a long time. We get along so well. But the truth, uncomfortable truth, is that familiar is not functional. Having things in common does not guarantee competence. And this is how sometimes it can show up in the initial attraction. People tend to be drawn to potential romantic partners who share similar values and hobbies or cultures or even physical attributes, physical appearances. And they perceive these similarities as a sign of compatibility or trustworthiness. So it means that if it makes me feel this way, if I get this vibe off of this person, that means we will be compatible. We know that that's not true. That's just not how life works. And so it brings in the idea of confirmation bias. So you hear things like, you guys look so good together. Oh, we get along so well. So it's like, since I feel this way, then this person is confirmed to be the person. But when confirmation bias shows up, it's like it makes you overlook red flags because now these similarities are so big and they're reinforcing your positive assumptions and mutual beliefs and making it much harder for you to critically evaluate red flags or incompatibilities or even problematic behaviors when they do show up. So you want to have diversity on the team, But when your hiring process is looking for a fit, which in other words, conformity, so sometimes those things, they don't sit well nicely together, especially if we're not clear on the kind of role that we're trying to fill in. And it's, again, like I always say, it's true for HR as it's true in life as well. Affinity bias can also cause individuals to rely on stereotypes or make quick judgments, potentially leading to misunderstanding or missed opportunities to connect with those that really, though they're different, but they align with your values. Now let's look at impact of affinity bias in relationship. Unchecked affinity bias can result in echo chamber, where each partner continually validates the other's opinion. They always say if you are in a meeting room and you have 5 people there and you make a suggestion and everybody agrees and nobody gives any constructive feedback, nobody questions the decision, then really you needed only one person. The other four were just excess to requirements. So sometimes this creates a need to conform, to just align, because you already are so focused on the things you guys have in common. And so a conflict resolution will be difficult. It means that when a conflict comes up, you over amplify the areas where you are familiar, and then you sweep the conflict under the carpet. And so growth or a resolution of conflict is going to be a problem in this kind of relationship. And this bias can also hinder empathy and acceptance of differences. And it may also encourage, inauthenticity of the person in the relationship. So when you recognize and address affinity bias in relationship, you can nurture greater understanding, and challenge limiting assumptions. Again, remember I said a bias is almost normal. It's default. The idea here is that you recognize it and you take steps to manage it. And so when you're getting into relationships, be careful of the qualities or characteristics of the person that is loud in your ears, or is making them much more attractive, for you. And the best way to do this is always to recenter back on your purpose or the reason why you're going into the relationship in the first place. Now let's talk about something that is closely related to affinity bias. It's called trauma bonding. Trauma bonding was really a lot of work has been done on it by a psychologist called Patrick Cairns, and he did a lot of foundational work to describe trauma bonding as strong emotional attachments that's formed through repeated cycles of mistreatment and intermittent reinforcement. Now, the premise, of which his work is based is on an abuser and the abused, and how the abuser almost gets the abused person dependent on them, and then which then makes the process of abuse, to continue, because at some point it doesn't really look like abuse anymore. But basically it's when your brain bonds with inconsistency and the abused person starts to feel loved, even when it's just crumbs that is being given to them. And it's they do this thing with, they give love, they withdraw it, and necessitating the need to pursue or do something nice so that you can then qualify for that love. But sometimes I feel it also shows up in ways where we connect with people. And sometimes people are attracted to other people that reflect, that maybe spark up a need in them. Um, I've seen people in relationships where they're in there because they feel nobody else gets him or nobody else understands her, or they feel the need to rescue. They need to be a savior or to someone comes up so strongly for them, and they feel like if I don't take care of this person, nobody will. If I don't support this person, or they're gonna hurt themselves. or they're going to get into problem. And I'll share how that sometimes come up when I'm giving feedback to the managers I support. So a typical scenario at work can look like when an employee comes to the manager and says, I'm having a rough time at home. I'm going through a bad divorce. I'm in a custody battle with my ex, and it's taking a toll on me and it's affecting my work. And then, the empathic side of the manager wants to say, I'm so sorry about that. Okay, don't, no problem. Let me know what you need. Let me know how we can support. Those are nice things to say. But then when the manager starts to like drop the bar of performance expectation because, you have to understand they're going through a rough time and they feel the need to be that shoulder for them, then they start to blur the lines of where their responsibility extends to. Now, the ideal thing for that manager is to say, "Oh, I understand, and I'm going to refer you to HR or to the HR business partner. I'm sure we have an employee assistance program that can support you. And if you need to take time off, just let us know." You know, that's a better way, because then you move that responsibility, which you're not capable of handling anyway, to the professional that can manage that. Thereby helping yourself stay focused on your role as the manager, which is to manage their performance. So sometimes when we are not clear on our role, we blur the slides and we take on responsibilities that we are not equipped for, and we take on problems that we are not trained to solve. And so that is a way trauma bonding can show up, and especially if the manager has been through something like that. So they understand how difficult it can be. But the point here is you have to, as they say, stay in your lane, stay within the requirements of your role. Now, another author, Judith Herman, in her book about trauma and recovery, talks about how our nervous system confuses danger and love when safety was never modeled consistently. And this always brings me back to how we were raised, how we were parented, the kind of environments that we grew up in, and the kind of things we were exposed to. It affects, sometimes how we show up in relationships.